This episode of the Two Planker Podcast is sponsored by Line Skis. Founded in 1995 with a mission to grow and rejuvenate skiing, Line has spent the last 25 years skiing the wrong way and having fun while doing it. Whether it's the playful Line Blend or the Tom Wallish Pro, the lightweight Vision Collection or the cutting-edge Blade, Line offers products that you can't find anywhere else. Be sure to check them out at lineskis.com or your local ski shop to get a pair for this season. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Two Planker Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Schaefer, and today we have a very special episode for you guys. Just yesterday, LJ Strenio announced his retirement from professional skiing, and today we got the chance to sit down with him and go over some of the greatest moments from his career. This episode will be up tomorrow technically, so this news will be 2 days old, but we had a great chat, and it was really cool getting to go over his whole career, basically from start to finish. If we miss anything or anyone, it's just because there was so much stuff to talk about, and honestly, it probably just slipped our minds. Shout out to everyone that submitted viewer questions. If you missed out on that this time, you can catch it next time on our Instagram at TwoPlankerPod. As always, if you like the show, be sure to subscribe and give us a rating. Shoot us a DM if you have a guest request, because I look at all the messages, and it actually helps to get to know who you guys want to see. That is it for the intro. Here's LJ.
Here we are, back with another episode. And would you like to introduce yourself? I'm sure everybody knows who you are at this point.
Yeah, sure. My name is LJ Strenio, and I'm, currently retiring professional do weird stuff skier.
Yeah, cool. So today we're just going to do basically like a retirement party for LJ. To kind of just go over your announcement yesterday. So do you want to walk us through the thinking and just tell us like what led up to your decision to actually, formally declare, hey, I'm going back to amateur status and I'm going to take you're not going to retire from skiing, but, step away from professional duties. So like what led up to this big announcement that, kind of got everybody fired up yesterday?
Yeah, it's funny that I guess I didn't really give it enough thought. I was very surprised by the response. I kind of just wanted to make it known that because I'm gonna try to not be on social media very much anymore. I'm pretty burnt out on it. So I was like, I should, maybe I like to talk to kids when they DM me on Instagram and stuff. So I didn't want to be ghosting a bunch of random kids. So I was like, I should maybe make it known, probably not going to be around as much. But then of course, it is a big deal, at least for me. So it was a more overwhelming and really nice response than I expected. But I mean, the lead up to it has just been that I have been in school for 5+ years now, studying computer science, and it was a very gradual process going back to school. I was in my mid to late 20s when that happened, and kind of just signed up for community college courses on a whim initially. Was starting to get the vibe that maybe there would be something else down the line for me outside of skiing eventually. And then it just really grew into a passion and something I wanted to do. And thankfully timed really well with me getting older and starting to feel the age a little more and more. And I guess long story short, I've just recently finished, and if I'm gonna use the degree, it was time to get a job. And I actually spent it was actually I've been on the job search for a few months now, and it's very competitive and very intense. And many rounds of long virtual interviews. And so I'm super excited to be done and get this offer. It's been a long time coming in many ways.
Yeah. Have you told people publicly where you're going, or is that something you're trying to kind of keep under wraps?
Just because it's still just because I haven't officially had my first day and everything. And I'm so new to the whole job world. From what I've read on LinkedIn and stuff, I'm just kind of holding off now. It's not a huge surprise. It is kind of it's a pretty cool company that probably quite a few people, I would guess, have heard of. I hadn't heard of them though. But they're just a prime candidate for their San Francisco based company that does does work that lends itself really well to needing someone to do a lot of text processing and using AI that can read text. But yeah, probably maybe just not mention for right now, just because it's also new to me, just to be safe.
Yeah, definitely. So you're in, like we were saying before we started recording, you're in Portland, Oregon right now. Uh, are you going to be working remote, or are you going to actually get up and move down to California?
Yeah, so that's been the double-edged sword with applying for jobs. You always hear like, oh, they work in tech. They're going to be so made. There's so many jobs. It's so awesome. And so I am going to be working remote, which from this point forward will be awesome. I'm going to stay in Portland, me and my girlfriend. So super nice there. But applying for jobs, you think it's nice because you can apply for a remote job anywhere in the country. I was applying to jobs in New York City as well. But the downside of that is when you're entry level with no experience, that means that you're also applying against the pool grows too, basically. So I was applying against all these people with PhDs from all across the country. Whereas before everyone went remote, you were only applying against people who wanted to live in the city that you're based in. So it was, even though it was probably more competitive, like locally, you also had less people that you're up against. My LinkedIn premium that I paid the month for was like, oh, this is the other people that have applied for the job you're looking for. And it's like 60 PhDs. And I'm like, oh, how do I compete?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's tough, man. And so, I mean, last time, kind of everybody heard a big career update from you. You were working for NASA as an intern. So, how did that experience go, and what kind of happened, immediately after that? Because we got the update. You were living out in the desert, but I didn't really hear much after that.
yeah. And so that was like another consideration when just because I would always like read random comments from time to time, like, is he still working for NASA? So I was like, I should make like some kind of official announcement on my Instagram. But I mean, that all went great. It was just an internship. So it was only 4 months for the fall. I definitely didn't want to be done skiing yet. But it was really cool. I moved to Southern California. I moved onto the Air Force Base where the sound barrier was broken for the first time. It's the only place in the country you'll hear sonic booms on the daily because it's normally illegal just because it's so disruptive. But yeah, I had like security clearance and had a dude with an M16 at the gate check my badge every day and drove across the salt flats but ultimately just sat in a laboratory at a computer writing code every day. And actually the type of coding I was doing was completely unrelated to the field that I'm currently going into. I'm doing like AI related stuff now, but that was more hardware and more computer chip related and I guess less complex and more like electrical engineering style. It's called embedded systems work, I guess, which was really fun and I think it helped on my resume. But ultimately, it was just a fun experience, I guess.
Yeah, and I got to ask because I know people are wondering: were there any alien encounters during your time there?
No alien encounters that I can talk about publicly. I signed a lot of NDAs.
Yeah, yeah,
No, it's well, actually, Area 51 or whatever whatever Air Force Base is called, is only actually it's pretty far, but as like the crow flies, it's only like a couple ridges over, and it's pretty similar. Just that whole area of the country is just like open desert and prime for like either setting off nuclear bombs or testing experimental aircraft. So,
yeah,
uh, yeah, I think that's where the aliens are.
yeah. I mean, a lot of people talk about aliens, but the sad truth is, it's probably just advanced weapons testing going on that they don't want anybody near. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're probably right ultimately, but it's fun to wonder.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. I mean, so we can get into a little bit of like the greatest hits from your career. I mean, you've talked like a lot of the greatest things that you've done have been, talked about a lot, like the backflip onto the pillar and the whale tail. And I mean, we could talk about those, but let's start up at the beginning. You really got your start with the Rails to Riches and Young Gun Open. So, like, does anything from those really early days stick out to you? Like, any encounters with anybody in particular? I mean, I'm sure that's when you were first meeting like everyone from the industry. So, like, when you look back on those early days and the start of everything, what kind of sticks out to you?
Yeah, those definitely were totally where I got my start, and like I owe so much to Line Skis, but actually in Cyber Cartel was kind of and Mike Nick. I think it was, I guess J Lev and Line were definitely a major part of it, but I think even Mike Nick might have even been the original one to think up this whole Young Gun contest. I can't remember honestly, but it was the two of those guys scheming together who were both childhood heroes of mine. They were professional ski boarders and then skiers in, in a time where the lines were blurred just because so much was changing with like the construction of all of skis and stuff. But I think the Young Gun Open was really where I got my start because you just opened so many doors for me. I would say that's usually where I consider my like pro career starting. I went from like, getting product here and there to like, I got to be in the Orage Masters that year, which, I guess kids today might not even know what that is anymore, which seems sad to me. But at the time was like, it seemed like such a big deal. I think those guys gave me my really first big opportunity. And then Rails to Riches, that was where I was meeting a lot of these like well-established people who already were in the industry. But then Rails to Riches, I feel like eventually grew into this big contest that everyone, for the East Coast was like a huge deal. But at the time, the first couple of years they had it, it was still pretty quiet. But it was a time when I was getting to meet all of the people that would become my like long time best friends in skiing. I think Garai Dadali won the first year ever. And it was just so much money. I remember he was like 15 or something. And he was like, I have $4,000. It was like, that's just a stupid amount of money. And so meeting all those guys from New York, the whole traveling circus crew, and then also going down, we had our own crew. I was skiing with guys like Whit Foster, and Henny VJ is like one of my original friends who's a filmer in the industry now. That was cool because it was getting to know people who were going to become big players in the industry. So were very significant for me.
Yeah, and that's funny because you when at least when I think of the traveling circus, like you're totally a part of it for me. And it's funny that even though you're an East Coast guy, you didn't grow up with these guys in upstate New York. Like you were always a Vermont guy. So what did you think? Like, because I'm sure it was plenty of years between like you first meeting them and then actually doing the traveling circus. What did you think when you first met like these goons at at Rails to Riches? Like, what was your first impression of that whole crew?
Yeah, so well, that's a great question because at the time, yeah, it's cool to be so considered part of that crew. But originally, ironically enough, me and Whit Foster, both from northern Vermont, which is like the epicenter of the East Coast skiing, were the outsiders in this tight, like the park community back then was so small, and so there was two main groups. You were either like the Western New York crew, as far as like really good skiers were concerned, because like at every East Coast contest, the winner was either, I guess, from Quebec, from Western New York or somewhere in New York, or a group of like the Academy kids, Waterville Valley and Carrabassett Valley Academies were, I think they're still pretty big, but they were huge back then. And so, ironically enough, me and Whit Foster were the two oddballs floating in between at every contest, and they were such juxtapositions because, like, you have the I Hate New York traveling circus was the I Hate New York crew back then, and you have them who were like the most weird and like, I mean, just traveling circusy, like very unorganized and stuff, but competing at the time, and then but so talented. And then on the other side of the ring at every contest, you have like, very established, really good skiers, like Andrew Hathaway and Michael Clark, and then guys like Clayton Vila and Cam and Nick Martini, and I could just go on and on. But those guys all came from more formal backgrounds. So it was funny going to contests to see those guys who, have coaches and are clearly good, but going toe to toe and like definitely evenly matched with all of these weird, stinky kids that are now in their 30s and still stinky and just as weird as ever. Um, but seeing that, it was like such a strange mix of people. And then me and Whit were somehow the weird ones, even though Burlington should have all of the skiers. It was good getting to know them though, and it was exactly how you would think. You know, they haven't changed much. They're really passionate about what they do. They've just gotten older, and I would say the same about myself, hopefully. So it was awesome and more exciting than intimidating because we didn't have a huge crew of people to ski with, so it felt like we found our people. It was like, oh, there's other people out there. Like, this is so nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you mentioned uh like the young gun to Orage Masters pipeline. So when you went to the Orage Masters, were you one of the only really young guys going to it, or was there like another crew of kind of up and coming guys when you first went?
Yeah, so the last couple of years they did it, it was just and I think it was fun that they changed it to being just kind of whatever crew can go and less organized. But some of the earlier years, you had to be representing part of like a major brand. And so the level of entry was like way crazier. It felt like way more difficult to you could never just create a team and go if you were like a good skier. You had to be on a brand. So there was other young, I guess technically other young riders in the contest, but it was because they were like super pros. Like it was like Simon Dumont and Sammy Carlson, but they were like super well established and part of Team Solomon. We were the only group of ragtag, like we were the only names on the course that no one had heard of. Like everyone else, there might have been a couple young people, but like they were like very well established. We were definitely the only ones who were like, you guys are who? The young gun? What? It's like, no, we gotta be here. We swear.
Oh, that's so awesome, man. And so, I mean, so after that, what kind of came next in your career? Was this filming with these companies, or was it college out in Utah?
It all kind of happened slowly but quickly at the same time. Nat like all It was all kind of mixed together. I didn't want to go to school at all, ironically enough, but my parents were like, just go ski in Utah and like live in the dorms and take classes, and then you can still ski. It'll be fine. And so I think probably the biggest change for me was filming with Meathead Films, which was kind of happening around this time as well. And I guess I met those guys around that year as well, and I just started filming with them. And so while I moved out west for school, I think the next major step for me was starting to film with companies like Rage Films and then eventually Poor Boys. But I never would have gotten noticed if it weren't for the Meatheads. And I still continued to come back east like crazy and film with them for years to come. I was very interested in competing as well, and competing was never my strong suit, but I think like a year or two later is when I finally started to see a little bit of success in like slope style and big air contests. But I think it was probably always overshadowed by the filming that I was doing, and definitely had an easier time getting invites from ski companies or from film companies than I did from like event organizers for like Dew Tour or something.
Yeah. And so I did give you a hint of this before we started, but so Rage Films, were you in the movie Pretty Good?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Pretty Good was the movie that got me hooked on skiing. I probably watched that like a million times, and I think it was like Ian Costco's opener where like all it's just basically him trying to like him almost showing his dick the whole intro. And it was just like so
God.
immature and so funny. But
Oh,
whatever happened to Rage Films? I never was able to find anything. Like I was super stoked on them. Maybe even like a couple years delayed because I had it on DVD, so I don't even know if it was like current when I was watching. But like whatever happened to them?
So yeah, and those guys were awesome, and I still keep in touch with a lot of the filmers. A lot of the filmers are like good friends of mine and transitioned to other things. I think Rage fell into this like unfortunate pit of being like the middleman. I think Meathead Films sometimes suffered from this unwell as well, unfortunately, of being a very legitimate film crew in their own right and having uh putting out like really good movies but like constantly losing writers getting called up to like the quote unquote like big leagues, which is ironic because a lot of times I think Rage and Meatheads probably had better put out better films sometimes than like the than Poor Boys or Level One, which were like the big dogs of the park scene at the time, and even like MSP and TGR obviously. But yeah, I think they were always a lot of times kind of seen as that mid-tier company, and so I think they still I don't know at this point, but I'm pretty sure last I heard they were still doing they did commercial work before they were a ski company, I think, and I think they're still doing commercial work and very successful at it, I think. But I think losing athletes and just that whole struggle, and I would imagine like sponsorship dollars and stuff too, was probably tough enough. And they were probably having so much success in the commercial world that I think they pivoted back to just more general commercial work. But I'm not sure, honestly. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if there's anyone listening that hasn't seen Pretty Good, I recommend going and looking for it because it's just good movie, great soundtrack, some pretty cool park builds. I mean, from that period of your life, you worked with so many companies. Is there any like moments that really stood out? Any people you were with, moments or just places that you've gone that like really stuck out to you? Like, damn, I'm loving being a film skier right now. I absolutely love this because I'm sure there's plenty of moments that sucked, but what really stood out?
Yeah, definitely. And man, it's hard to name names because I'm gonna forget some.
Yeah.
But like I would say like one of the people I grew to respect and view as kind of maybe like a mentor figure the most was Dan Narkunis, who I still keep in touch with from time to time. But the other filmers too, like I think the first person I ever filmed with actually was AJ De St. Fale, I think is how you say his last name. He was the first one to ever come grab me. And then, of course, I can't leave out the infamous Pete Alport, who was such a hard worker and always made sure to push us as hard as we could. Or I guess maybe Pete Alport actually was, he might have done Rage stuff, but I think actually I didn't start filming with him until the Poor Boys days. Um, but I think Standout, that was such a time of flux for me because I was still kind of coming into my own. I definitely wasn't established yet, and I remember getting the call from Rage when I was home on Christmas break and treating the phone call like a job interview, and it felt like very serious. They were like, "Would you like to come film with us?" And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so crazy." But then it ended up just being more of what I was already doing with like the traveling circus guys, going out and hitting rails and stuff. But so I think, yeah, I think the first like major trip, I can't remember if it was Such as Life or Pretty Good, but you might actually know better because it sounds like you know Pretty Good very well. But we did this trip to the Midwest, and it was me, I think Gus Kenworthy was there. It might have been, I don't think Walker was filming with them. I'm totally spacing on who else. I think Schlopey was there. Um, Spacing on the rest, but we were in the Midwest in Minnesota, and it was freezing cold. And I think I just wore like three hoodies. I never wore a jacket, but it was like -20. But we hit like a lot of really crazy rails, and I think it seems like some of the movies it seemed like they had an effect on you, thankfully. So thank you
Yeah.
for watching them. But that really felt like where I really started to get my start filming.
Dude, I mean those movies are just so good because it's like everyone's in like skittle colored outfits, like quadruple, like 4 to 7 times XL. And the hits aren't super huge. It'll be like an urban rail with like a 2 on 2 out, but it was just the vibes for those movies like really encapsulate that time. So I feel like my DVD, like I tried to rewatch it the other day. Not even the other day. This was during lockdowns. That's when I really went on a binge. and it's just like, dude, trying to find a DVD player. Like I was putting it into my PlayStation just to try to get that to work, and the whole menus were messed up. So yeah, I mean that movie definitely some good vibes to that. But I mean that's cool that you've gotten to see like the different styles of every company and like what you liked, what you didn't. Before we move past it, before we move past college, and this is something I learned while I was listening to your old interviews last night. What was up with clown school and that whole group of people? Because I realized I had seen an edit from it. The edit that I had seen from clown school was the fuck edit, but that
Yes.
was it. So what else? What else was up with that crew? Because it seems like it was a pretty legit group of guys.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that people still know or talk about clown school, and I think for me, the fuck edit was our like, or I guess the other guys went on and did a lot of other cool videos, but that was like the pinnacle for myself personally, filming with those guys. That was just my crew of college friends, and a lot of names that ended up being really successful. Like, we were talking a little bit, guys like John Ware and John Kutcher, and Ryan Weibel, and oh man, there's just like so many other names, so I don't even want to start rattling them all off. But like people who are very successful skiers and are still in the ski world now. But it was ultimately just like, 4x9 was the crew of all the guys that were a year older than us, and our generation all started going to the University of Utah the next year, and we were all living in the dorms together, and so we kind of filmed our own film company, and it was way less, I guess, not as badass as 4x9, and we were always hanging with the 4x9 guys. But we just were like, hey, we have our own crew. The internet, posting videos on the internet, this is going to really make us sound old, was very novel at the time. Like, it was very ski movie based at the time. So like YouTube was really just starting to become a viable option around then. And so we were producing videos around then. And so because it was so new, our videos got a lot of traction. And that whole season was like, and Evan Heath and Kevin Steen were really talented filmers. But I was just talking with John Ware recently, and he was like, "That was the year, man." And it seemed like a lot of people watched those videos, but ultimately, which is awesome. Ultimately, it was just a crew of college friends who skied and were very, very stoked on making videos.
Yeah. What was the dynamic like between you and 4x9? Was there some friendly competition, or were they generally? Was it more like you guys were competing with them and they were like, yeah, whatever?
No, no, totally like friendly competition. Like I mean, we ultimately were all skiing together on like anytime we were filming, and we were all go home and we'd all be drinking and partying together at night as well. And honestly, we were all of the clown school guys were a lot of times in the 4x9 movies, and vice versa. I mean, Good Company is pretty much like evolved out of what 4x9 was. And I was filming with those. I When filming with Good Company last year, it still feels like I'm just filming with 4x9, honestly.
Yeah. And so do you have any memories from the 4 by frat days? Any party stories you could pass on to us?
I probably should have memories, but most of them have been erased away. No, I mean, just college shenanigans of being a young college student. You know, we definitely, there was lots of partying and drinking and stuff, but honestly, we were all so passionate about skiing. It was like ski hard, play hard. I was thinking when we were talking about Rage Films, like one night I hit an urban rail till like 5 in the morning because it was during the like nighttime era where you go at night to not get busted. And so we hit a rail till like 5 a.m. and I had like an 8 a.m. class. And I remember just like getting into my dorm room and like dropping my ski stuff. I was like soaking wet and freezing cold and just like sitting under the shower for like 45 minutes exhausted before going to get breakfast and heading off to class and just being like, this is not sustainable. But I think we got wise eventually because 4x9 started to have they loved doing play on words with 4x9, and so they had 4 to 9 with 4x9, which was just a regular house party, but it would start at 4 p.m. and end at 9 p.m. so that we could wake up early still and go skiing the next day. So we'd like 9 p.m. was like last call, but like we had been drinking since like mid-afternoon. So we found ways to play hard and work hard.
I think that Steve Stepp told me that that was the goal. The goal was to end by 9, but by the time 9 o'clock came around, you guys were already wasted. So it was like, ah,
Yeah.
whatever. Let's just keep partying.
Yeah, who knows? Sounds about right.
Cool. So traveling circus. When does that come into the picture for you? Because obviously that's what the most of the viewer questions were about, and like that's what people are like just still so stoked on. So like, what was the how did you get into it? Because you obviously knew the guys already, so and you were riding for Line already. So was it just like a natural fit? You're like, hey, yeah, let's go film this, go film that. Like, what was joining the crew like?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. All of these different crews are, skiing and filming and stuff. And where everyone, if you're as passionate about skiing as we all were and are, there aren't even really distinctions. It's just you just ski at every opportunity you have. So, starting to like beginning to film with Traveling Circus was no change for me. It was like during, I think it was during Christmas break, maybe the first time I filmed with them, but I don't even remember really. I had already been, we filmed with Meatheads all the time still. So there was no distinction. You didn't even know where the footage was going to sometimes. It was just like, yeah, I'm going to go film with Will and Andy some more. And they were like, oh, we're starting this thing, Traveling Circus. And I was just like, cool, I'm still just going to ski with you. Like, as I think maybe that's why it felt as genuine as it actually was too, because for us it was nothing different. It was still just skiing with your friends, but it was in fact the start of obviously this video series that, ironically enough, as well, is we would work so hard on these urban segments and like just bust ourselves up trying to put them together. What kids know us from is like our goofy hijinks and stuff from Traveling Circus. So it really put into perspective, like, how important it is to just have a good time and try to portray skiing as something fun and not too serious. But yeah, there was no like, Will and Andy just started it because they didn't want to get jobs, and they were so successful at doing what they're already doing and having fun that it grew into what it is. And once they realized they started getting traction, it made it all the more alluring to want to keep filming with them. When the trips started getting longer and crazier and further away and better funded, and so what went from just, of course, yeah, we're just going to keep skiing with our friends, it turned to like, ooh, yeah, I hope I get invited on this trip.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if you have any insight into this, but what were the Meathead guys thinking when Will and Andy are basically starting up their own like version of Meatheads? Because it's an East Coast crew going around skiing. Were those Meathead guys kind of like shivering in their boots? They're like, shit, these guys are kind of doing the exact same thing that we're trying to do right now.
They were so pissed. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, same deal. It was just, we're skiing all day, every day. There's only so much filming you could do. There was never any, and if for any, even if there was like, even if it was just to have some kind of animosity, those guys, the Meatheads, like Jeff and Rooster, are like the coolest guys ever. Like they would never be, they would never be bitter or have ill will anyway. But there definitely was no need either. It was just, it was just another outlet to be producing content. And they were filming so much stuff on their own anyway. I feel like a lot of times Traveling Circus was filming at the time. Meatheads were probably off at the Chick Chocks filming like epic powder. And again, Meatheads were, their peak was at an era still where annual big releases was still very, it would be funny to consider that a video series on YouTube could be competitive with a ski movie, which today it almost, if you didn't grow up in that era, it almost seems ironic, or it almost seems like laughable that that they wouldn't be able to compete, because it's very much the opposite now. Like no one would ever buy a DVD now, and even full movie releases on YouTube that are that long format still struggle compared to shorter videos. But at the time, no one would ever be intimidated by a couple guys making short YouTube videos.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they're probably like, all right, you kids can go do whatever you want. This is a joke,
Exactly.
anyways. Yeah. Wow, that's funny. So, I mean, Traveling Circus has covered so many years. What is it, like season 14 now? If you had to pick out just a couple memories that really stand out to you, I mean, like going abroad or just any particular moments, like what really stands out to you from your years with TC?
Yeah, there's so many. I always think of that saying, like, it's like from some movie quote, like, I wish you could know that you were in the good times when they're actually happening. I think it might be The Office or
Yeah.
something. TC was exactly that. I did not realize that it was happening. But some of the best memories definitely in season 4, Which Way to the Autobahn. We just happened to go to Europe during the craziest snowstorm of like the century, and we're skiing like 3 feet of powder, like fresh snow every day. We just completely fill in every day. And we're supposed to be like hitting rails and stuff, but it was just too deep. We just had to ski powder. But just traveling around Europe, being young and dumb in a van in like a little motorhome, just skiing absolutely deep powder and not knowing what we were doing was a huge highlight. And then, but honestly, a lot of my like favorite episodes, looking back too, are ones that aren't nearly as like epic and romantic. Cold Turkey from, I don't even remember what season, but it was like 5 years ago, was just us skiing in the fall around Thanksgiving at home in Utah. But I think preseason vibes is so true to the traveling circus mark. And that I really like look back on that time. I think, and having Jake come on board, and uh, I think that really just embodied what skiing with your friends and not having good snow conditions and still having like a super good time is all about. So looking back on that episode too, and so many others as well, like going to China with those guys and stuff was wild. But a lot of the just at home backyard style episodes also were just uh, so fun and memorable. I guess one more. Sorry, I'm maybe rambling. We went back to Vermont for 2 episodes, 2 or 3 years ago. I think Hard Telling, Not Knowing, and East Coast Real Hardcore or whatever, part 3 or whatever. We stayed at my mom's house in Vermont, and things had started to slow down at that point for me. So it felt very like full circle to like go back home and just ski around with like some of my OG friends, and just enjoy Vermont where I grew up, fell in love with skiing. So yeah, I guess a bunch of different episodes for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah. Have you ever actually tallied it up and counted how many different countries you've been to through skiing? Not even just through TC, because it's been, like especially if you like start looking at like level one, is always going abroad. Like, have you ever really sat down and tallied it up?
I haven't tallied up the countries. We A long time ago, I think there was like some app came out where you could like check all of the ski resorts you've skied to or skied at or something. And so I think I remember Will and I maybe went through, and Will had skied more than like 50 resorts, which doesn't sound too crazy. And that number is way bigger for him now, but it's actually pretty impressive. As far as countries though, I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's definitely, I mean, it's got to be like, it's more for Will and Andy, but it's got to be like maybe like 15 at least, I don't know. Most of them just all these tiny little countries in Europe, but I mean, yeah, we skied on I think 5 continents, and I've surfed on 6. We wanted to go to Antarctica. It was always a big trip, and we were super close. I don't know if I'm allowed to. They have all these like trips that are permanently in the works until they happen, and they're just waiting for the stars to align. So I don't want to. We almost had a big one happen this fall that I definitely can't give away, because when they do finally go, it'll be really epic. but you're just waiting for the conditions to be right. Obviously, a lot of times they're really exotic, but I will give away at this point because it would be unlikely to happen. We almost went to Antarctica for traveling circus, and it was going to be like Will got us like a huge discount, and it was only going to cost like 10 grand, I think, each. Um, and we were going to get to go like take a cruise ship and like ski on like icebergs and stuff. But that's just still so much money, and the whole crew couldn't swing it. But I think, putting it in perspective, that's like super cheap to go to Antarctica. Um, so sorry. Anyway, yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I don't know the number of countries, but they definitely want to ski on all 7 continents. That's for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that would be that would be crazy. Would you come out of amateur status if they said, "Hey, we got one more spot going to Antarctica"?
Oh man. I mean, if it was in like the next 6 months, I wouldn't want to, compromise my job. But if I was like settled away comfortably enough and had the in and outs figured out where I could take off like a month and that was going to be okay with my work, I would totally do it. Oh, I would be all. And at the time, I was like 10 grand. I was like, yeah, that's a ton of money, and like I'm all in. I was so prepared to go
Yeah.
a couple years ago, but yeah,
Oh
who
man, that's
knows?
funny. So, like on a different note, but still within the traveling circus world, what'd you think when Ian Compton retired at such a young age? I mean, that was like looking at that now, that was like almost 10 years ago from like this point, you know? So you have an additional 10 years skiing beyond when he retired. So he must have been like in his early 20s. So what'd you guys think when like this young 20-year-old is like, "Yeah, I'm gonna just call it quits."
I mean, it was a bummer because he was obviously a very integral part of the crew and just a good friend of ours and a Vermonter, and he was really coming into a lot of success at the time. He had started filming with Level One. This was this was at least a few years before I had ever filmed with them. So it was definitely, he was definitely really successful. But I think he had an injury, and I can't remember if it was, I think it was his back, but it might have been his head. But it was enough that it was like a pretty big deal. In Compton, he he's particular about what he wants out of life and what he's into, and he's passionate about the things he's really into. But I think I think Utah and like Salt Lake life wasn't for him. He liked, he ended up, I think he's back down out of there now, but he ended up moving up to the cabin and having this really nice, quiet, uh, traditional Vermont life that suited him much better. So I think there was like a number of factors going on for him, but the hustle and bustle of Park City and in like the Salt Lake vibe, which is like such a scene, was just like definitely not for him. But I think ultimately it was that injury that the injury that was like the catalyst to have him switch it up. And I think it was the best for him, but it was a huge bummer because he's obviously like our really good friend and a huge part of the crew. But you never, and I would imagine the same is true of me and my friends right now. I'm sure Will, Jake, and Andy, and like Ross and those guys are not like hyped that they're hyped for me to get a job, but they also probably, you want to ski with your friends more. So it was that same kind of vibe where it was a bummer to see him go. And we still skied with him quite a bit, um, but yeah, who knows? Who knows what might have become had he not been injured. He might have had many many more epic urban segments to come, but such is life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just funny because it's even after all these years, it's like 2C is gonna still carry on despite anyone leaving. It really seems like it's hinging on Andy and Will staying part of it, which is kind of trapping. It seems like it's trapping them in until they're old men on walkers until they can leave.
Oh no, they are very happy, and they will not let it. Anyone listening that is a TC fan, just know that those guys are more dedicated than any of us, and they won't let it die until they absolutely have to. If they have funding, they're gonna do it forever. So I'm the weak one throwing in the towel, but those guys bleed TC, and And so I'm not afraid of the show ending anytime soon.
Yeah, that's really good to hear because there was a period of time, forget what season it was, but I've been watching since the beginning, and there was like one season where it was kind of up in the air. They're like, I think people were talking like, oh, this might be the last season of Traveling Circus, and it seems like after they pushed through that season, from then on out, it was never a discussion again whether or not it was going to end. But it seemed like maybe it was like when Shane was leaving. I don't even know, but there was one season it really seemed like people were getting ready to wrap it up. I don't know if you have any insight into that, but I think I kind of remember that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific instance. And to be honest, I was kept away from some of I was never traveling circus isn't my child. I just got to be along for the ride for a lot of it. So I think there's probably a lot of inner workings between the founders of it that I don't know about. But I think there were times where funding was tight, and I think times where things were a little tricky. And I still hear about times where it can be a little difficult here and there. But I think at this point, it's so well established that it's clearly a huge, it's Line's most successful marketing thing. It's just such a huge monster that I think maybe at times it was tricky, but I know the people working at Line now fully recognize how successful Traveling Circus is. So um, I think it's very safe. I think there was a time where Will and Andy, I don't know if Line technically owns the brand Traveling Circus or not, and so I think that might have been what was happening. There was discussion of needing more funding, and so whether Line was willing to release the brand so other sponsors could come on board. And I think that's a tough line to walk because I think Line knew how successful it was and didn't want to give it up, but also maybe didn't have the extra funding that those guys wanted to grow it a little more. And it's obviously like a nuanced situation because Line has thrown so much money at Traveling Circus, so it's no fault of their own. But I think walking that line between the proper amount of funding was being figured out at the time. But I think they're pretty well funded now. When they go on trips, they seem pretty comfortable and are happy to help anyone who comes along out along the way, which has been super nice the last few years. But yeah, I guess I don't know the details.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that they're in good shape now. So you kind of mentioned it, and this is something I feel like comes up every episode, mainly because like everyone's moving out there. But like being from Vermont, what was your first impression of Salt Lake when you got out there? Because everyone says it's just like once you move out there, it's like a different beast.
Yeah, it's like a mecca. Uh, and Vermont is kind of like I said, Vermont kind of feels like the center of East Coast skiing, but it's just such a different monster. Like Utah, the mountains are just so much bigger. There's so many more resorts. The parks are like so much, more legit with so many more features. It's just, um, it's like growing up in the small pond your whole life and being super excited on something, and then finally getting thrown into the ocean and seeing how big the world really is just it was a great environment to like grow and cultivate our like love of skiing further. um I don't know, just yeah, absolutely mind blowing. Skiing 7 days a week, all day, every day, like powder, uh, powder park. It didn't matter. It was just like, um, yeah, Utah is crazy. I think it seems like things are changing now. Everything's getting so crowded because everyone is equally passionate about skiing now, which is pretty cool. But I think the lifestyle and way of life that we had is probably couldn't be reproduced as easily now, which is crazy.
Yeah. Wow, man. So I'm just looking at my list of things that I don't want to miss because you've done so many things. One of the biggest ones that stands out to me, and I don't even know where this falls on the timeline that we've roughly stuck to, but your 2010 to 2011 season edit, my hold up is like it's two parts, and it might hold up as the best season edit of all time. It is just so freaking gnarly. So what was going on that season? You were just skiing at a different level. Like what had what happened with that?
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, can you imagine? Like, you could never have a 20-minute season edit in this day and age. So it's
Yeah.
funny. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was a unique time. I think, yeah, for me, that was just kind of, that was, I mean, that's what kind of when I peaked, I guess, 10 years ago. I mean, there's been, it's bimodal or whatever. There's different peaks and humps along the way, but that was really where I felt like I'd come into my own and just was so busy all year. I was literally filming or competing every single day. Like I literally would come from a contest and go film urban and then leave an urban trip and fly straight to like wherever the next contest was and compete and then go back. And it was just, I think I was just, you see it in like more successful skiers and like other people as well, like someone like Tom or like guys like Alex Hall now, where they just really, you see like that maybe they were really good when they were younger, but then things like really start to click and then they just start to like really, really have a lot of success. And like for me, it wasn't winning contests, but maybe it was like getting a lot of the best shots that I ever got filming. But you see guys like that where they just all of a sudden go from being good to just winning every single contest. I feel like that was that season for me where like maybe I had gotten some like pretty decent urban shots or like started to be a little competitive in contests. And then that season was just, I think a lot of companies just realized they wanted to film with me. And I was just really starting to figure out urban skiing for myself, I guess. And also I broke my kneecap the next year. So I was able to sit down on a couch for like a month and collect every single shot and put a lot of time into editing it up. So combination of things, I guess. But thank you so much. I look back on that season really fondly. So to hear someone say that is very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the soundtrack also was just absolutely killer. It was just such a great collection. So, I mean, from that edit, I mean, across the two parts, what are some of the shots that stand out to you? I don't know if you could remember them in particular, but because I definitely have a
Uh,
couple that stand out to me.
Yeah, well, off the top of my head, like the whale's tails, and I think I'm always anytime people are talking to me about different exploits over the years, the whale's tails comes up a lot. So I guess I don't need to like deep dive into that, but I remember that was that season, and that was like one of the more memorable shots of my whole life. And with the Meathead Films crew, who were obviously some of the people I'm most grateful towards for all they did for me. So that was an awesome one. But I think that might have been the year I did the like crazy poor boys, the first like elbowing rail. I've done a few now, but
Yeah, like
uh,
with the 90-degree turn in the middle of it. Yeah, that was crazy.
yeah, this we called it like the saw rail because
Yeah.
yeah, Spokane rail. And I was just talking with Pete Arneson the other day about it. But him and who Noah Wallace and a couple other guys too were all from around there. And we're just they all knew Cody Carter, who was the filmer for Poor Boys that I've been filming with. And so cool then to just some random dude coming into town and like, oh yeah, we'll show you all of our urban rail spots. And they just brought me from rail to rail and were like, you can hit any of our spots that you want. And at the time I was just like, cool, thanks. But now I'm like, wow, that is super cool of all those guys to show me around. And then Pete actually hit that rail first, but that rail was really gnarly. Like even today, I think it would be really intense to hit. So that was another. Yeah, those two are standouts off the top of my head. I can't remember the edit well enough to recall other stuff, but because there was a lot that year.
Yeah. That was a really sick year. And I think so the whale tail, I mean, obviously it's been brought up in every interview I listen to. And but I gotta ask because I talked to Dan Brown and you submitted the viewer question for him. And that shot, just the photo, what did you think when you went over to Dan and he's like, yo, look at this photo that I got of the whale tail? Because that thing was my iPhone background for years in middle school, high school, and I'm sure plenty other kids. So what did you think when you actually saw that photo?
Well, it's funny that the photo became such a big part of that shoot because, as like a film skier, this is like the unspoken thing that no one will ever tell you, but is definitely in the back of the athlete's head is like, you're always really preoccupied with the video shot and kind of tend to not care about the photo quite as much, even though the photo is like, a lot of times, like in this scenario, the photo is like stands the test of time and is the really important part. But just being a film skier, you care so much about, you're worried about your own little lane and so that you're in. So you're like looking at the video shot and want to make sure you got the grab good and that everything on your part was good. The photographer wants to make sure that everything was in focus and good. The videographer wants to make sure that they got. So I don't even think I was super preoccupied with the photo. I think I was like just wanted to make I barely landed that before the sunset. So I just wanted to make sure that it was actually the shot. I think, and I still think this, since I was I carved all of my forward dubs at the time. I wanted to be a little more straight. And so like I still am over the tail, but like I was like, I remember thinking maybe like, oh, I wish I shouldn't have carved so much. Like I'm a little off to the left more than I wanted to be, which is such a trivial and like I should have been like, that's the most epic photo ever, thanks Dan, but instead I was just, I think, caught up in the moment and just like, oh yeah, that's sick. I think we cracked a bunch of beers. My mom actually was like coming home from work and had stopped and watched, and it was just like a good moment with friends. I think I don't think I didn't just take it very seriously at the time. We had no idea that, Dan was going to submit it to like, he like raised a bunch of money for like the hurricane fund. And then I think just like this last year for Shane McFall's kid, I think he did another fundraiser with it. It's ended up raising like a bunch of money. Dan's such a good dude for doing that. And then, it ended up being like a cover of a European ski magazine, which was really cool. So big ups to Dan for doing that, and the Meatheads for setting that up, because I think honestly the red tape around letting us jump that thing was insane, and so that was Meatheads all the way lining that up. I think those sculptures are worth like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the owners were very particular that we do not touch them at all because they're pretty delicate. They're like black African granite, I think they said. It's like super expensive. They have had to like ship them. They got like shipped across the world or something crazy. Ross and Bergia hit his head going too slow into it on it and like knocked himself out. It was just like such a ridiculous day all around. So the fact that it even worked out was awesome.
Yeah, that is such an awesome clip, dude. That, I mean, it's just like it's just a timeless clip. The photo always gets resurfaced. I'll probably use it as the promo for this. It's just the photo.
Yeah, no, I never get enough of it, so happy to hear that.
Yeah. Do you know if there's footage of Ross knocking himself out on it?
Oh, there definitely is. I think there's little snippets in Meathead's movie that year, which is Prime Cut, but I think they were always really good about having a bonus movie in the bonus section of the DVD. But I think if you go into the bonus section of the DVD, there's like an extended version of like Rooster standing over Ross, like trying to see like, can you how many fingers am I holding up and stuff. I remember he was like really wanting to keep hitting it, and the story I always tell people is like trying to test to see if he had a concussion or not. And he was like trying to stand up, and we were like, chill out, Ross, and sit for a second. We're gonna ask you some questions. And he had been eating Oreos earlier in the day and had like chocolate Oreo crumbs on his lips still. And I was like, Ross, you were just eating cookies. Now, what kind of cookie were you eating earlier today? And he was like, Tuesday. I was like, yeah, you're not hitting this anymore. He was like, oh, wait, is that cookies? Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I thought you asked the day of the week.
Just wanted it so bad. That is so funny, man.
It's in there somewhere, though. I don't think that part, but there's the clip of him actually hitting his head is in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go track that down. That's funny. So you mentioned that after that 2010 to 2011 season, you got injured, like the season right afterwards. So do you feel like that kind of stopped the momentum of your career, or like what looking back now, since you've had some time, it's again like probably 10 years now, Like what did that injury really mean at the time for you?
It did. It totally cut me down in my prime. It's always hard to speculate what effect it actually had, but it did seem like a pretty big deal. I had been, all this filming had been really successful for me, but I was slowly starting to have a little more success competing. I finally started qualifying for Dew Tour every year, which I had failed to do many years previous. In a lot of these other slope style contests, I was starting to, there's a lot of opens around still. And I was starting to, make finals and sometimes podium at them. And so I think I qualified for Dew Tour slope style that year, which was like a huge deal for me. And the filming came so naturally, but I really wanted to be successful competing as well. And that year, with how the contests had gone leading up to that, Dew Tour, the first Dew Tour, it used to be an actual tour of contests. And the first one was so early in the year that I'd already competed. I think I did all right or something, enough to get in. So I was like so focused on that. And, uh, you know, having that injury just cut me down for the rest of that season. And then it was at a time where you had to qualify with points. The AFP was like trying to be like surfing at the time, which I can totally respect, but they were still kind of figuring it out. And so, having a blank rest of the contest season totally wiped me out as far as being able to qualify for contests the following season. So, it probably did have a pretty solid effect on me chasing contests, especially not being successful at it. You have to, if you're on the cusp of doing well all the time, you can't take a whole season off from it. On the filming side of things, it probably didn't matter at all. I missed out on the rest of that season, but Poor Boys and Level One and Rage and Meatheads weren't going to check how many points I had the rest of the year before they decided to call me up for an urban trip the following year. So it maybe just solidified, it maybe helped keep me in my lane more than I wanted to at the time. It was at a time where you didn't have to choose between filming and competing as much. And I really wanted to be someone who didn't choose. And up to that point, like I said, I had been going from contest to film shoot back to contest. After that, I really started to focus more on filming. And maybe I wouldn't have been as successful in filming had that not happened, if I had kept trying to fail at competing. But that felt like one of the biggest changes that came out of that for me. It all worked out, and you're never going to get everything you want. So I don't look back on it. I don't wish and wonder. But at the time, that seemed like a big deal to me.
Yeah. And so I actually do have a viewer question that's kind of asking about the industry at large. And I'm gonna start tying these in so we don't have another hour of viewer questions at the end. So this guy, Jasper underscore in. So he's wondering, if you're somebody that's like a full career with a company, you have a really good relationship with them. If you get like a life altering injury, especially like working for them, would they ever, take care of you beyond like your useful life as a skier? Say you get like horribly injured and then you can't walk, potentially for the rest of your life. Would they ever? Is there any precedent for them contributing money? Like, like, hey, you were good to us for all these years. Here's some money, for what happened.
Um, I mean, I don't want to say that it never happens, but when you're talking about like lifelong permanent injuries, I think it's very, very rare, and not maliciously from these companies, but honestly, it's a tight margin to justify giving athletes money in hopes that they're going to create sales. If a company gives you $10,000 or something, that means that they think that you're going to generate more than $10,000 worth of sales for their company, which for a lot of small companies is just ridiculous. But for bigger companies, like I think Red Bull, and I don't know this because I never had an energy drink sponsor, but Red Bull seems like they treat theirs very well. And Red Bull also has incredibly deep pockets. So if there were a company to do something like that, it might be a company like a massive non-endemic sponsor like Red Bull. But even then, I kind of doubt it. Maybe if it got a lot of like attention in the media and this person was like a Shaun White or something, or a Tony Hawk, I could see that. But for the most part, no, you're kind of just shit out of luck. It's pretty cutthroat, man. That being said, when I had my knee injury, which was not wasn't a career-ending injury, but was very much removed a whole season, my sponsors were gracious enough to still pay out my full contracts for the year. I only skied for like a month, and I think I was I was obviously riding for Line, but I think I was riding for Saga at the time as well. And there was no questions asked. I still received all my paychecks for the entire year, which even that is pretty cool of a company to do when you're working on annual contracts.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. That especially that like all these companies, that have been so great to you your whole career that they looked out for you that time. So shout out to Jasper for that question. So we got another question, and it does kind of related. So this is from Jack Martin. So I'll kind of interject myself into this. So I remember in the injury video, you're worrying about if you'll ever be able to walk or run again because you were big on marathons at the time. So Jack Martin's question is, he says, "Tell us about your marathon experience. Didn't you go skiing right after running a marathon?"
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for remembering that. That was a really fun day. Yeah, I've been into running kind of my entire adult life. Just my mom's really into running, and I think it's just a good form of exercise. But I know most people do not enjoy running. But I had gone for like a 27-mile run a year or two before, just on my own for fun, and realized that distance running was exciting for me. And so wanted to do like an official marathon. And so had been training a little bit, decent bit that fall leading up to that. And then the mountains in Utah had just got a bunch of snow, and the traveling circus guys, of course, were going to go do some filming in the mountains that day. And Shane McFalls was like, "We got to film this, and you got to come skiing after." And I was, of course, like, "Yeah, that'll be awesome! Like, run a marathon and then go ski. Like, that sounds super cool." But so yeah, my marathon experience was just probably like a lot of other people's. Wake up super early, try to force yourself to poop in a porta potty before the run, and then really pretty backdrop. It was on Antelope Island in Utah, which is this island on the Great Salt Lake, and it was like pitch black the first like 40 minutes of the run, and then you're just running through farmland. And I didn't know they were going to show up, or maybe I did, but it was a big surprise to see them on the course with the big traveling circus van. And then got to the end of the race, and Jeremiah Paquette, another good friend of mine, thankfully, I didn't have the foresight to think that I would want clothes to change into, and he gave me all these old clothes. And then they whisked me off to McDonald's, and we probably this is where my experience differs from most people's. Instead of going home, I could like barely sit down to like poop or pee or whatever. I took a quick shower, and then we went to McDonald's, and my stomach was feeling terrible. And then we just went skiing and built a backflip jump to play on for the rest of the day. And it was very exhausting, but that was a really fun day that I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. So you injure yourself. This is kind of where I have the gap in my notes. So it just goes straight from injury to real ski. I don't know how close in the timeline that is, but yeah, I mean, if you just want to jump straight into real ski, unless there was something in between that you feel like you'd really like to get thrown out there.
No, that's kind of where my career was going through some growing pains. And that's where kind of when, like I said, competing was slowing down for me. The Olympics were about to happen, and I wasn't going to be able to do that. I just was definitely not competitive enough. So I think that's maybe even where I started getting thoughts of going back to school, because I didn't really have something. I always like to be working towards something in skiing. And so I didn't really know what I was working towards anymore. So when real ski came around and I didn't get an invite the first year, I finally felt like I had something to motivate me again. And that's why there is kind of that gap between there, because I really was kind of lost and not sure. And then the year before real ski, not getting invited, I made I have a 2016 urban edit that you can probably YouTube or something somewhere. But it was me trying really, really hard to get into real ski. And so I worked really hard the year before. Uh, and then actually that was the year that we did the whole Vin Diesel shoot too. But the first half of that year had been filming Urban, and then sent that off to everyone that I knew that was a part of the whole real ski event. Just spam, mass email spam to everyone that edit. And then thankfully, so grateful I got that invite the next year, and that kind of that kind of rejuvenated my career a little bit, which for me felt like it was starting to die at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it came back strong because you got invited 2 years in a row, and then like I said at the beginning, you had the backflip onto the pillar. It's like one of the most just such a gnarly shot, probably one of the gnarliest shots that's been in real ski. So I mean, from those real ski years, what really stands out to you? I'm sure that's one of them.
Yeah, I approached those years very differently. Obviously, the first one I went way more hard into. I recognized that this was like my big shot, and that things were starting to slow down for me. If I had been like 20 or something during my first invite, things might have been different. But I was like, I knew I was getting older. I actually had just started going back to school at that time. I dropped out of I had this huge deal of going back to school in the summer, and then was in fall semester and was still going to ski that winter. But getting invited to real ski, you need to be on it like immediately. And so it was like Thanksgiving or something, and Utah got like 3 inches of snow in the valley, like so little. And I had just moved to Portland, was like getting ready for finals, dropped out of school. I have withdrawals on my permanent record now, not fails, thankfully. But I'd spent 2 months doing these courses, and finals were like a week or two away. Just immediately dropped out, and just so I could drive to Utah for 3 inches of snow, like had barely skied, hadn't done a backflip yet that year, and found that pillar on Google Earth. And that thing was made of more like pallets and dirt than snow. And like, yeah, like my first backflip of the year was onto that pillar. And that, it was funny because, yeah, that was like, I'd like barely skied at that point, had been like in school 2 days before. And that ended up being like one of the highlights of our video for sure. And cut myself open, got stitches that day. I was like, my elbow is like duct taped under my hoodie there. It was just like such a shit show and going so hard. And that kind of set the pace for the rest of that whole 6 weeks. And I'm like super stoked on what me and Jake put together. But the next year, I think we were a little demotivated by. I think anyone that works that hard wants to win and won't be happy with anything less. So I think we're in retrospect like super happy with how everything went. But the next year we were like, this isn't worth. Like, I'm not just trying to. I'm not like, I might not even get any kind of medal. I don't want to work that hard again for potentially like uh, you know whatever we're going to get out of it. So I was not going to do it. And Jake was like, dude, just take the money and just film an urban edit. Let's do something fun. And so you could probably tell the next year wasn't us trying to put our best edit of all time together. We thought it'd be really fun. We came up with a bunch of ideas and ended up doing the lines idea where we were going to make every clip a line. Some of our other ideas were we were going to have every single shot have to be first try. So we show up to an urban spot, set it up, and I have to do tricks. And if I don't get it first try, then we move on. Another idea was to have someone else skiing with me in every single shot. So like every single urban shot is doubles. We were thinking maybe do every shot no rails at all, a full urban edit, which doesn't sound as crazy now, but 5 years ago it would have been a little more crazy to have not a single urban rail in an urban edit. But for a bunch of different reasons, a lot of those ideas were a little too wacky. But having lines edit was a fun thing to do. And again, we didn't take it super seriously, but I think we still put a kind of a fun, cool video together nonetheless.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely one of the more unique ones that's ever come out. What's it like? So you were on the athlete side of it. What's it like being on the judging side now? Because I think I was talking to Jeff Schmuck, and he said that you're just such a sweet guy that you're having a hard time making like a firm decision about who gets what. And so, what was it like, understanding the athletes, they pour their heart and soul into it, and then you're just on the other side sitting in a room like, nope, this guy's is better. Like, what is that like for you?
Well, so yeah, I think having that athlete perspective really, I think, really made me take it so seriously and made me stress about it more than a lot of the other guys. Some of the other guys would be like drinking beers and stuff, which is perfectly reasonable and like you should be like relaxing, enjoying yourself. But for me, I was like, just all I could think about was how hard I worked that first year and how important it was for me. Uh, and if two guys are maybe like neck and neck between getting like like third and fourth place, like being on the podium or not, for me at the time that felt like such a huge deal, and I wanted to make sure that we got it absolutely perfect. So I was blown away that some of the other guys weren't taking it as seriously as I was. But at the end of the day, it's all just so subjective. And but I think, yeah, having that athlete perspective made it super stressful for me. And I just wanted to do, I cared and respected these new athletes and didn't want to screw them over. And ultimately your vote is only one in a big group of 5 or 6, and it's so subjective that it gets muddled. But I wanted to be sure that I did my part, and the people that I felt should do well, that I made my voice heard. So it was very stressful for me. And I'm like perfectly fine with the fact that someone might say I took it too seriously, but that's like our Olympics. That's like something I'll never forget for the rest of my life. So I think it's something that should be taken very seriously.
Yeah, and I think that's the end of my list. Before I get to the viewer questions, is there any recent happenings that you want to touch on before we start picking these off?
I mean, I'm trying to think. Not really. Just I mean, we covered most of the
Yeah.
big life events for me in skiing, and it's been fun to look back on all of them. Um, yeah, I think that seems good to me. If there's anything in particular, though, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of these viewer questions, so let's
Okay,
see the
cool.
ones that we've already answered. So the ones that have already been answered. Shout out to Holden, Rolf, and Sebastian asking about the favorite TC memories.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can't answer those directly for you, but we got those a little earlier. So there's another TC one from Floster, and he asks, "What is your favorite part about being with TC?" So not favorite moment, just like what is your favorite part about being with those guys and being part of that crew?
I think my favorite part about it is, skiing at a higher level, you start having to do things that scare you, or maybe you don't want to do, or, you just enter to push yourself to your limits. There's sometimes lines you cross that if you were alone in a vacuum that you might not otherwise do. Skiing with those guys, it's just having fun. It's literally just whatever you want to do all the time. And if there's something that you are excited about that is gnarly, everyone's going to get behind you. Everyone wants you to succeed. Everyone's going to bust their asses building that jump for you. And if you ultimately don't want to do it, they're going to be perfectly fine with it. If you want to do something that's really dumb that would never make it as a shot in a movie, that in like other situations, someone would be like, no, we're not going to film that, waste their time. Like they will always be down to film it. So I think the best part of skiing with them is it's the most true to what any of your viewers skiing experience with their friends is like. We're doing the exact same thing, which can be rare, at the higher level when you're filming for some kind of production or something. So that's my favorite part. It's just skiing with your friends.
That's so awesome. So we had another kind of TC realm question. So this one is from Trey Laddie. And so this is actually something we didn't touch on. He asked if you were going to make another Taft appearance. And I'll throw something on the end of that. What has been your favorite experience within the Telefriend tour? If you ever plan to come back to it.
Yeah. Well, it's so gracious of all these resorts to have us. If anyone that doesn't know what Telefriend Tour is, it's Andy Perry's activation tour, basically just going out trying to ski with kids all across the country to smaller resorts for the kids that don't get to go to Breckenridge and Vail and stuff on their vacations. Still get to meet and ski with professional skiers and just generate hype around the sport. I really like going to Pine Knob every year because Matt Dunn, the park builder there, is just a really stoked, awesome dude. Builds great parks and just shares that same passion that you see in people that love snow sports and love keeping in touch with him. But I mean, it's so hard to pick a specific memory from Tell a Friend tour because it's all just awesome. Anytime I've met a kid who's super stoked and saucer eyed and tells me they watch Traveling Circus, that it's so validating. It's so awesome to like have someone be stoked on what you're doing. So all of those moments skiing with kids, watching some of these kids try tricks for the first time for the sole reason that we're there and they want to do that trick in front of us, all of those moments have been the best. I don't know how many. I've gotten a few DMs about whether I'm going to be on Tell a Friend tour this year, and probably won't be able to go to many this year. As I start to figure out my work schedule, maybe that'll change in the future a little bit. But I will say that the rest of the crew and a lot of the younger guys, these up and comer guys like Pete Kukoff, who's very talented, and if you haven't heard of him, you certainly will soon. Those guys will all be there, so you should definitely go still.
Nice. Cool. So I will get into two kind of off skiing questions. Actually, no. Well, one of them is on skiing, and the other one's off skiing. The first one, I got to ask it because he submits it almost every time. It's from Ankilla. I don't know if you're familiar with Ankilla. He wants you to answer the question: is skiing sexual?
I'm such a being a data scientist now, I'm such a quantitative guy, and this is such a qualitative question. So I probably won't give as fun of and exciting as an answer as some people probably will. But in the purely literal sense that a numbers person would say, I would say no, that it is not. But in a more creative, artistic, fun sense, I would say it's incredibly stimulating in a number of ways, some of which could be totally construed as sexual in experience in qualitative nature. So yeah, sure.
There you go, Ankilla. You got your question.
Great question.
So the next one is from Dan Brown, our friend Dan Brown, and he said, "What can LJ tell me about the poet John Keats?"
Oh yeah. So I was just talking about how I'm quantitative. I was an English major as an undergrad, which is very qualitative again. But I had just written a paper on one of his poems during Rails to Riches one year and was talking to Dan about it. I think while we were waiting for podium results, and I think it was his concept of negative capabilities, which was a phrase he coined to mean that we need to all be satisfied and come to terms with the fact that you can never know everything, and that we're going to die just ultimately not knowing all there is to know out there. And there's so much awesome knowledge to have, but you can never have all of it. And so that was, I think that's what he's alluding to.
Oh, I like that. Two very different questions back to back. So we got about 5 more questions for you.
Okay.
So Evan Rush asks, what is, let's see. He just says a rail that you either had to go back to or definitely will go back to again. So, yeah, is there anything still on the bucket list for you? And is there anything that you've had to tackle over the years just to get it off your bucket list?
I mean, there probably is and are, but it all kind of blurs together. I definitely have tricks that I always wanted to do. One of my white buffalo tricks was specifically on an urban rail. This has been done on park rails a bit, but on an urban rail quad kink, a back 3 swap to a front 3 swap on the first kink to the second kink, was something I always wanted to do that will probably be done someday, I'm sure. But I would have loved to do. Definitely don't have it in me anymore, so I probably won't do it. But I think going back to negative capabilities, you can't know everything. You also can't do everything. And so there's going to be tricks that I'll just honestly have to let go. I was talking, there was some comment yesterday that Jake Strassman found that he sent my way about me trying to double backflip on a snowboard, I guess. And I was laughing and saying, if there was any trick that I wish I had done on skis that I haven't gotten around to doing, it's probably a double backflip on a snowboard, which obviously isn't on skis. But
Yeah.
so maybe I'll try to do that for a TC episode in the future or something.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So let's see. I'm gonna try to get some of these end on a positive note. So I'm gonna try to get some of the more negative oriented ones in here before we wrap up.
Gotta have
So
them, no worries.
Yod.r. If there's one thing you could change about the ski industry, what would it be?
Ooh, wow, that's a deep one that I haven't thought a ton about. I guess I don't know. Now I think about maybe accessibility. I mean, that's the whole goal with Andy's tour. Is I was gonna say like mentality, and I think it's getting so serious, but I think people choose that. I think things that people don't get to choose that have a big effect are accessibility, and unfortunately, it just inherently isn't accessible. But I think not inherently, it's becoming more inaccessible for a number of reasons. So I think that's a bummer, and I think I would make it more accessible to more people.
There you go. So I'm going to flip Mason Kennedy's question. So he asks, what will you miss? What will you miss least about being pro?
Oh man, that's there's a list of things, but late nights studying over the years for school and thinking about this transition. Um, some hitting an urban rail at like 1 a.m. and being like freezing cold and so tired and exhausted and being like really scared because I've tried something very, very dangerous a ton of times. And every single time I hit it, I have to be like fully committed. And it just takes everything. And, you're starting to get groggy, but it's something that requires all your focus not to get injured. Those are the times I think about when I'm like coding away at night and like, I'm like, oh, this sucks. I'm like, this actually isn't so bad. So those really high intensity moments, which oddly enough also lead to like the ultimate high, to getting those shots are the most satisfying as well, I guess. But those really scary, intense moments as you get older start to become more intense than you want. So the stability, I guess, of just getting to be safe at home, which will also, I'm sure, become very boring for me too. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And he asks, this is the first part of his question, what will you miss most about being pro?
Oh man, a long list as well. But skiing with my friends, all the free time, literally doing the exact thing I love for a living. Just a super long list of amazing things, which now makes me realize actually, those scary moments aren't the worst part. The worst part of skiing that I will miss the least is all of the business stuff, actually. The emails and the contracts and the trying to get money. Being cold and standing at the top of something that scares you actually isn't, from that literal skiing, that's like, yeah, definitely the lowest part. But there's all this other stuff that's not actually skiing that comes along that's way less fun, even than standing in the cold late night waiting to drop in on something scary. So I'll miss. That makes me realize that, yeah, just skiing with your friends will miss the most, which I can still do, but I will not be paid to do it anymore.
Yeah. All right. So Wamarin, he asked your favorite ski movie, segment, and math class.
These are great questions. Really great questions. All right, so ski movie. Can't give you one. It's got to be a tie. Sorry, deal with it. It's going to be Royalty, 1242, and Forward. which are Royalty, I think is an Iberg movie, I want to say. 1242 is like a Poor Boys Oakley movie, and Forward is obviously a Level 1 movie. There actually is probably other newer ones, and those are the ones when you grow up when you're a little kid, those first movies have the greatest effect on you. So off the top of my head, those are my favorite. Was it Skier or Segment, did he say?
Segment. You could say
Segment.
ski. You could do skier too right now if you want to give anybody anybody a shout out for favorite skier.
Yeah. Well, Segment, Dave Crichton's and Forward is like, and it's a lot of people's. And then favorite skier, Dave Crichton is one of them. Also, I haven't mentioned as much, but Andreas Hatveit, also huge hero of mine. So those two guys are definitely my favorite skiers. And then favorite math class, I think discrete structures probably, because it was so challenging and it defines a lot of the low level logic that you're required to learn as a computer scientist. Has a lot of combinatorics and other things that have big words like that. But it was very difficult and scary. But it was when I realized that I was going to be able to get through. I didn't think I was going to be able to finish my degree. I didn't think I was smart enough. So that class was a big turning point for me. Very fun course.
Wow, cool. And then the final viewer question. This is from a group of friends, and they say they asked, "Will we see a lifetime edit / career challenge rail compilation?" So, are we going to see all your clips thrown together?
Oh yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, I've had a couple people already talk to me about putting them together. I kind of want to put one of my own together. It probably won't be anytime too soon, just because I'm so focused on. I want to make sure I hit the ground running on this new area of life for me that's very foreign. So I want to focus on my job for a bit, but gotta throw the compilation together. So there'll be probably in the next year or something. I want to make like a full director's cut or whatever, athlete's cut of the highlights. Don't hold your breath, but definitely will be down the line somewhere.
Sick. Well, that is all of your questions, but I want to say something I've been thinking about. So you're ending your career at a point that not a lot of people get. So it's two things. The first thing is that you're ending on your own on your own terms. You're not injured and you're not dead, which is great. And the second thing is that you're ending with people wanting more, so people aren't sick of you. So this is like probably the best. This is the best retirement that you could have had. So I'm very happy to see that for you. Thank you for coming on. It was awesome getting to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I like to listen to podcasts, so I've been a listener of the show for a bit, and so it's cool to get to be on here. And yeah, super flattered that people want to ask questions or are still interested in my skiing at all. At 32, I never would have guessed that. So all the support from everyone is so cool and just super flattering and uh, a little shocking. So yeah, it's bittersweet for sure. But all I can really say is thank you so much.
Hell yeah. And so do you want to leave off everybody with anything, or is that all you got?
I mean, just thank you. I think that's the best way to end it. Is just thank you, thank you. I really appreciate anyone that enjoyed watching or interacting with me in any way. It's been a blast, and hopefully, I'll be skiing for years to come. So hopefully, catch you on the chairlift.
There you go.